I've worked with Pieter for a number of years at the Australian National University in Canberra. Pieter's currently in the Netherlands and he's joining us from the Netherlands today. This is our first attempted remote talk at this conference, so we'll just have to see how it goes. All right, over to you, Pieter.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, hi everyone. I hope you can hear me well and see me well. What I'd like to talk about is the CINS, as we call it, the Complementary Inertial Navigation System. As Randy mentioned, it's kind of a DCM replacement, and it's kind of something else, but I'll explain. One other thing I should add is that this is really sort of an update to last year's talk, where we introduced CINS for the first time at an ArduPilot Develop conference. Okay, so what is CINS? It's a new geometry-based approach to inertial navigation, which this year at least uses the inertial measurement units, so the gyros and accelerometers. It uses GPS measurements, both position and velocity, and it uses magnetometer measurements. And what's special about CINS is that the mathematics on which it's based are totally different from the existing EKF. So while the EKF is based on probability and stochastic processes, CINS is based on geometry principles. And the nice thing about this big difference in the mathematics is that we expect to see totally different failure modes as well. So of course, every filter can fail somehow, but we should hopefully see that they fail in very different situations. In theory, thanks to the derivation, the way we've done it, CINS should provide global stability and convergence properties. Of course, in practice, there's still a lot of assumptions around that the measurements are somehow nice. Since last year, we've developed CINS from being a nice idea with some very initial results into an actual viable alternative state estimator that's currently on a pull request into the main branch of ArduPilot, I think. So what are the goals of CINS? CINS, as mentioned, is similar to the DCM in the sense that they're both based on geometry and they both provide this global stability and convergence. However, unlike the DCM, which only provides attitude estimates, CINS provides a full navigation state. So like the EKF, it provides position, velocity, attitude. It even provides biases for the gyroscope and accelerometer now. At the moment, our aim is to gradually replace the DCM with CINS as a fallback for the EKF. But long-term, what I'd like to achieve with this is to provide a full-featured alternative state estimator to the EKF, so that you, depending on the sort of behavior you'd like to see from your state estimator, you can choose which one suits your need better. Okay, where are we at this year? So, like I said, you can fly CINS today if you want. You just have to check out the relevant branch from Tridge's fork of the ArduPilot, and then add this flag, enable CINS to your WAF configure command, and there you go. The rest is as usual, and then you should be able to fly CINS. So far, the tuning that we've set as a default has worked well for our tests. We've tested on both copters and a plane, and the performance is reasonably similar to EKF3, although we're not able to use all the same sensors that EKF3 uses. And notably missing is the barometer. So I want to give a bit of an overview of the different features of CINS, and I'll explain some of these in a little bit more detail. Firstly, there's the stability properties. So unlike the EKF, which is only what we call locally stable, meaning it'll recover as long as the error is small enough, CINS should recover from any error, no matter how large. The second feature is GPS delay. So we derived some new mathematics to handle GPS delays in a natural state independent way. We've added some sense of modularity. Now, this is what I mean by this is that we're able to use magnetometer and GPS velocity, but you can use also only GPS position, and you can actually estimate the full navigation state using only GPS position. So you don't have to rely on having a magnetometer or GPS velocity available, although you can use them, and of course they should, in general, improve the estimate. Very recently, we added a rough indication of filter health by using a low-pass variance filter. And one significant change for practical purposes from last year is that we actually implemented the tuning in a way that you can set the tuning parameters directly through MAV proxy. You can change them mid-flight if you want, but do so at your own risk. So I want to talk really quickly about these different features. We have GPS delay and smoothing. So as I mentioned, we developed some new mathematics to handle the GPS delays. And what's really important about this is that the way we handle them is totally independent of the current estimator's state. It only depends on the incoming IMU measurements. And this is a really important property to ensure the robustness of the filter. Moreover, with this mathematics, aside from handling the inherent delay in GPS measurements, so you always have something like 100 to 200 milliseconds of delay, we can also use it to smooth out the GPS measurements. So what we do is when we get a GPS measurement, instead of doing a big jump to our estimate at that time, we actually do a little jump and then keep doing little jumps until we receive the next GPS measurement. But of course, as you progress in time, the GPS measurement becomes more and more delayed. But because of the mathematics we have to handle this delay, that's okay. So what are the results? Basically, one, the fact that there is GPS delay doesn't really deteriorate performance. And the second thing is that because the state updates are smooth, because of this smoothing, this gradual delay of the GPS measurement, we end up with a much smoother trajectory estimate rather than one that jumps at the rate of the GPS. Okay, I mentioned modularity. I've got some simulation results on the slide here. So even with only measuring the GPS position, in addition to the IMU inputs, you always need the gyroscope and accelerometer. But even if you only have GPS position, we're able to get global convergence, so converging from 179 degrees of roll in the estimator error. Of course, if you add other sensors, then the estimates converge more quickly. What the graph shows is 4 different versions of the estimator, SP being position only, PV being position velocity, PM being position magnetometer, PVM position velocity magnetometer, compared to the true trajectory. Now, these are simulation results. They're not practical flight results, of course. I would be hesitant to turn on the estimator with 179 degrees of roll in practice. But still, you can see that even with only the position measurement, if you look at the red dotted line, it does actually converge the whole filter state. Okay, in terms of tuning, we have 18 gains to tune. Most of them are relatively self-explanatory, I'd say. I mean, there's the gain for GPS position, the gain for GPS velocity, the gain for the magnetometer, etc. One important thing is that these gains are not really like the noise covariances that you see in an EKF. So in an EKF, you'd have to work out somehow the stochastic properties of your sensors. These gains that we've got are much more like traditional PID control gains. So there's somehow some sense of a proportional gain, a derivative gain. And yeah, so it's a matter of tuning them. It's not a matter of working out stochastics of your system. And as I mentioned, you can set these now directly from the parameter editor in mavproxy if you're flying. Although, yeah, of course, be careful. Okay, so to summarize, I thought I'd put up some tables. Here's the first one, comparing to where we were at the developer conference last year to where we are this year at the developer conference. I've highlighted the new additions. So already last year, we were estimating all the states. We had gyroscope and accelerometer inputs. We had GPS position outputs. This year, we've added compatibility with GPS delay. We've added GPS velocity, which can also be delayed, by the way. And we've added the compass. We've also added new states, the accelerometer and gyroscope biases, which turn out to be reasonably important for good flight behavior. And we've increased a little bit the number of gain states to be able to incorporate these. So the auxiliary states we've increased from 6 to 10, and the biases require separate gain states, a bit like covariance matrices, but a lot smaller. So we have 54 of those. We still manage to keep the same stability guarantees. We have our global asymptotic and local exponential stability. Let's compare that over to the DCM. So I'm just listing the 2024 version of CINS now. CINS provides a whole navigation state. DCM only provides attitude and gyroscope bias. Of course, it's not compatible with GPS velocity or position. But where they are similar is that they both provide the global asymptotic and local exponential stability. Compared to EKF3, we're looking a lot better now in terms of the comparison. We're both providing the same navigation states. We're using the same inputs. CINS is using GPS velocity, position, and compass, while EKF3 uses all of that, but it can also use airspeed. It can also use baro. I believe it can also use optical flow or VIO. So there are a lot of sensors that we haven't yet added to CINS. Unlike the EKF procedure, there's not a, if you tell me a model for the sensor, I can't just add it to CINS. I can't just linearize it and add it into the CINS filter. We actually have to derive some new mathematics to be able to do that in general. So this is why progress maybe is a little bit slower than it could be if we were doing an EKF style filter. Okay. In terms of additional states, we just have the accelerometer and gyroscope bias, while the EKF also has magnetic field biases and estimates the wind velocity. So there are a few more states in the EKF that are useful for flight that we don't support yet, but these are on the wish list. One big difference, though, is that all these nice features of the EKF do cost in terms of having a very large state covariance matrix. So it's a 24 by 24 matrix, which that's a lot of matrix entries compared to the number of states in CINS. And finally, the key benefit, I would say, of using CINS over EKF is that we do provide that global asymptotic local exponential stability, whereas the EKF only provides the local exponential stability. Okay, and just getting towards the end, I wanted to show off a few bits of experimental data. So this is from some flights we did. I think these were from the flights we did in May, testing out whether CINS could actually be used in closed loop for flying. What you can see here, what I want to point out is if you look in particular at the yellow, green, and black lines, the yellow and green lines are the EKF and CINS, while the black line is the AHR2, which is the DCM. And so what you can see is that CINS is much more consistent with the EKF than with the AHR2, despite, as I mentioned, being really based on these different mathematical principles. Okay, so this is roll and pitch. We also have yaw. And again, you see that, okay, there is a bit more of a difference here. but the output from CINS is still much closer to the EKF than the attitude heading reference system is at the moment, than from the DCM. In terms of, I also want to show off quickly velocity, north and east velocity. So what you can see here in particular, aside from that CINS and the EKF are reasonably consistent, what you can really clearly see is the delay in the velocity. So if you look at the dark green line, especially towards about 8:23:15, you can see that the velocity measurements are way ahead, way past the line from CINS or the line from the EKF, and this is what I mentioned about being able to handle that delay effectively. Okay, so I'll finish quickly. CINS has come a long way since last year. You can try it today. I hope you do try it, and would be really happy to receive any feedback. The performance of CINS is comparable to EKF3, but it doesn't support all the same sensors, so you should not expect necessarily to get exactly the same performance in all different situations. At the moment, my wish list for improvements includes supporting the barometer, supporting wind velocity or airspeed estimation, and taking advantage of the weather vane effect for fixed wings in particular. And aside from that, please get in touch and let me know what you'd like added as well. So any other features I'd be really interested in including. And I'll finish off by thanking all the people who've been a part of this project so far. So on the left, there's a picture from the day we spent flying CINS in May. And on the right are all the people who've been involved in developing CINS and the mathematical framework for this. Yeah, thanks a lot.
So, questions now. We're okay? Yep. Great. So, Rishab, got a question from Rishab?
Hey, Peter, great talk as usual, and nice to hear from you.
Hi, Rishab.
So, a couple of questions from my side. First being, since you already have this working with ArdioPilot, can I take my existing replay logs, which I usually have like a drive with like hundreds of replay logs at this point? Can I take that and compare your branch so that I know exactly what the differences are with the existing EKF data and yours?
I believe that should be possible. So we definitely do have it compatible with replay data. I don't know, this is my weakness, right? I'm much more an academic and a mathematician than I'm a software engineer. So
architecture-wise, it's built on top of.
It does work with existing replay logs.
Awesome.
Thanks, Rich.
So in theory, we can already work with real life data from hundreds of vehicles already.
Absolutely. I believe so, yes. Yeah.
And my second question was, in the EKF, as long as we have a sensor model and states are observable, we can usually integrate them very, very easily. What is so different about this algorithm that it requires so much analysis for each sensor? And the follow-up to that would be, what is it in the sensor that while we're picking out, how easy would it be to integrate it? Like, how do we know that?
The key feature that we've relied on to be able to integrate the sensors is that they're geometrically nice. I'll put it that way. So how to explain that? Basically, because with GPS position and velocity, you get the full position vector or the full velocity vector. And the same with magnetometer, you get the full vector. Compare this over to barometer, you only get one component of the position vector. You only get the height. And what the particular trick that we mostly rely on is if you change the reference frame with respect to which you express your system. So usually you think about the system expressed to an Earth surface fixed reference frame, an NED frame. But if you change this reference frame, then the effective position measurement you would expect to get changes as well. The point is, if you know what the GPS position and measurement is in one frame, then you know what it is in another frame. But if you only measure the barometer height, you don't necessarily know what it looks like in another frame, because you don't know. You need the rest of the position states to be able to express that, and that's mathematically the reason that it's hard. In general, yeah, it's just not built on the same principles, so linearization doesn't work.
Right. I guess
I hope that's a decent
follow-up
answer to your question.
on that. Yeah, but thank you so much.
No, thank you.
So quick question on the the tuning side of things. You mentioned that it doesn't depend on the or is it correct when you said that it does not depend on the quality of the sensor or the stochastic quality of the sensor, how imprecise it is and stuff like that. What does it actually depend on, these biases and the tuning component of this algorithm? Like what would make it vary between, say, vehicles or platforms or sensors and stuff like that?
So maybe I didn't explain super well, right? But the what I was trying to say is that these are not you shouldn't read these gains as if they're covariances or inverse covariances or something.
Right.
Rather, they're like PID gains, right? So definitely, if you have a noisier system, you're going to need to retune the gains or maybe adjust them a bit. What I was trying to say as well is that the gains that we've put into as a default for now have worked across a number of systems,
Right.
And have given decent performance.
Right.
You could probably improve the performance if you tune them more carefully, but then of course, if you have a noisier system, you might get worse results. This is, in general, the way that I would propose you think about PID, right, is that if you put the gain higher, your system will converge faster, but it'll be more sensitive to noise. If you put the gain lower, then it'll converge slower, but it'll be less sensitive to noise.
Right.
So this is very similar. Does that explain?
Yeah. What is the performance of this sort of estimation on, like, high dynamics situation, like, FPV flying and, doing state estimation in those kind of system? Does it improve over EKF, or it's worse than EKF, or what?
So our experiment, we haven't done that many experiments. What we did do, I believe Michelle flew an FPV drone at around 100 kilometers per hour, and that was a really nice test for CINS.
Right.
It managed to work and stay stable despite some very, very quick flights. Meanwhile, the EKF switched between IMUs because it was having problems. I don't think it broke, but CINS is not built to switch IMUs at the moment. It just runs. Maybe Tridge or Michelle has a better memory than me.
Yeah, definitely would love to see those logs though. Yeah.
All of those logs are public.
Okay.
We have a public repository of replay logs, including all of those logs on that 5-inch freestyle quad.
Yeah.
Where Michelle was deliberately trying to break the state estimators.
Yeah.
And you can replay those logs and play with them.
Very nice. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tridge.
Hoi, Pieter. So, hello, George here.
Hi.
Is the GPS as a sensor in the minimum set of sensors required for this filter to work?
You require a GPS position. I mean, in general, we require at least a position measurement.
So CINS is different to the DCM in the sense that it can't just operate in an attitude-only mode. It needs a position as well to converge.
Yeah, so it should be possible to
We lost you there. Can you repeat?
Mathematics won't break from having only attitude measurements, but it won't numerically it will break because it's expecting a position measurement.
Yeah, thank you.
So yeah, you do need a position measurement to run it at the moment. We could try and add a mode later if that's something people are interested in. If we did this, you would end up with just the original DCM basically.
We have time for one last question.
Hey, Peter. Thanks
Hi.
for sharing this. So my question is just on your point you made about this in some way being better than EKF. I guess I just want to hear you speculate, like, isn't it apples to oranges, like a probabilistic model versus like a well-defined geometric model? Like, why would you say it's better? Is it just you have a better model, period?
No, look, I mean, I don't mean to say that one is strictly better than another. I think they'll both be better for different situations. Yeah, the key thing where you can say one is theoretically better is in terms of stability results. So CINS has a global stability result, the EKF doesn't. But okay, what does this mean in practice? That depends, right? It depends on your situation. It depends on how friendly your measurements are. Of course, one weakness in a sense is that we're not able to handle covariances directly. So the EKF, in theory at least, should be locally more optimal somehow than CINS. Whether this is true in practice is again questionable, right? So in the end, I'm sorry if I said one is better than the other. I shouldn't have.
I think I'm putting words in your mouth a bit. I guess maybe a more focused way to ask what I'm trying to ask is the Kalman filter lets you have some fudge factor, right, in your model. Do you have the same flexibility with a CINS approach?
Can you explain what you mean by fudge factor?
By fudge factor, if your model for the innovation is a little off, that's okay because you have sort of the probabilistic property to it. So I know I actually don't know what CINS is, like in terms of its lineage of where it's from, I guess. So could you just
yeah, so I mean, CINS really is it's the grandchild of DCM, I guess. It's really built on the same principles, but applied, you know, we had to develop some new Lie group theory and do a bunch of mathematics to get this to work. If anyone's interested, let me know and I'm happy to send papers, right? But I didn't want to get into the mathematical details today. With all that said, you should expect similar performance to the DCM in a sense that, you know, this, the fudge factor you're talking about, it should work even if the measurements are not precise. How well that'll work depends on the gains that you've chosen. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. So the gains are what give you that model flexibility in CINS.
Yeah. So and as a matter of fact, I mean, you can think of the EKF in the reverse way, right? That the covariances somehow dictate what the gains are in the filter. Yeah. And so CINS is, it's just based on gains.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for your question.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Pieter, for joining us, and delighted to have that. And I'm looking forward to more people trying out CINS on their own aircraft. And if you want help with the practical setup of CINS, I'd be delighted to help. We do have a CINS estimator thread on Discord if you want to join in there and discuss the practical side of setting up and running CINS on your aircraft. Thank you, Pieter.